how do you dribble a basketball really close to the ground? And as you get close to the ground, you intuitively, everyone intuitively knows who's done this. You don't move your whole arm. Your whole arm, it's just impossible. You move your wrist. So I might bounce a ball from up here, from chest height, with my whole arm. And as I get lower and lower, it's still from the arm. But as I get lower and lower and lower, it starts to turn more into very relaxed wrist movements, not from the arm. Hello and welcome to the Heart of the Piano YouTube channel. I'm Bob Rose. Welcome to this video. This is on wrist staccato. So this is where the wrists go up and down like this, and we do staccato, this kind of thing. How many other different kinds of staccato are there? Because really, I would argue that wrist staccato is the most important kind of staccato. For a long time, it's probably going to be everybody's only way of doing staccato. We could, let's say that we're taking a scale. Let's say we've got a C major scale, which I'm going to be using for a lot of this. Normally like this. This is just legato. Now, if I wanted to play that without being lightning fast, but I wanted to play it reasonably fast and I wanted to play it staccato, I would probably do something like this. Which means that that staccato motion has got to come from somewhere. For me, the wrist is by far the easiest place that this can come from. Now, where I think a lot of people are going to go wrong with this, hopefully a lot of you will have already have watched one of my recent-ish videos on how it's really quite wrong to think of playing the piano as sort of really coming from the fingers and the fingertips. Almost all of the time, we really don't want that to come from the fingertips. We want it to come more from the metacarpals and the wrist and the arm. And in that video, I'll leave a link above and the link in the description below. I basically was talking about the concept of levers. And that this is a tiny lever, this joint here, it's a very small lever, slightly larger lever, bigger lever, even bigger lever. And it's easier to have control and dexterity with the slightly larger levers. Now, the wrist in particular, the wrist can actually move incredibly quickly. Now, what this video is, the reason why I'm making this video primarily, I want to make a whole load of tutorial videos. There's going to be loads of tutorials for the upcoming ABRSM 2025, 2026 pieces. I'm going to be making loads of tutorials for those pieces and other pieces. Now, in the past, every time I've made a tutorial for a piece, I've had to kind of reinvent the wheel every single time. Okay, in this piece, you're going to need wrist staccato. This is how you do wrist staccato. And I have to explain it from scratch every single time. So what I've been doing and what I'm going to continue doing is make a whole load of videos about the basics of technique so that when I get to the individual tutorials, I can go, here you need wrist staccato, go watch that video. So, by the way, do click on the subscribe and the bell icon below if you'd like to know when these videos come out. Now, what I'm doing in these videos is I'm not just going to describe it completely from scratch. I'm also going to draw on clips from previous tutorials that I've made on other pieces. Now, in this particular one for the wrist staccato, there's one tutorial that I made for a previous ABRSM piece. I talk a lot about the basics of getting the wrist staccato. I talk about how you want to imagine that you're bouncing a basketball. So if you stay with me and then watch that clip, you're going to get everything from the beginning. And then there's another clip as well. It's a bit of an older one, so the quality isn't, like the video quality isn't quite as good, but it's still probably going to be useful. And what I'm just going to do now is give you some of the finer details that you're going to need to know that perhaps I didn't quite emphasize strongly enough in those earlier tutorials. So the thing that I really want to emphasize, looking back on that previous video that I made, it's really difficult to control the tips of the fingers for many reasons. And one of the reasons is to do with the way that our tendons are all wired together. So I explained in that video that if we move the distal joints, and these are like the last two joints, the joints nearest to the fingertip, if we move those joints on any individual finger, particularly the third finger, the fourth finger, and the little finger, if we try and move just those joints on their own, we can't really do it. They're going to pull the other fingers. So if I pull the third finger on its own, it doesn't just go on its own. It starts to pull the fourth finger and then starts to pull the fifth finger. If I try and pull the fourth finger, it's really tricky. It starts to pull the other ones. I can kind of do it from this joint, not the joint nearest to the fingertip, but if I move all the joints, it can't help but pull all the other fingers, and so on and so on. So basically, when you try and just move your fingers from the tips, it's very difficult to do it in a way that doesn't pull all your other fingers. And when you're trying to play fast and evenly, that's a nightmare because your other fingers sort of get pulled in. So for this reason, if I want to play something like a scale, staccato, we've got several options. One option is to pull with the fingertips. And if I do that, that is one way of giving us that staccato sound. Now, this is an incredibly advanced way of playing that I would say that even the majority of concert pianists are not able to do. I have spoken about this in previous videos, I think in particular the one on C.P. Bach's Solfeggetto, where I talk about that here it is quite useful to do this very, very short staccato with the fingertips, but that it's really an incredibly advanced technique that even a lot of concert pianists don't do and can't do. So if that's really difficult, what other ways have we got of playing staccato? The metacarpal joint isn't really very good at going up and down very fast. So like if I'm playing a scale, I mean, it's just not really possible. It's just not that possible with the metacarpal. So we either flick inwards with the fingertips, can't really do it with the metacarpal. If I was to move my whole arm from the elbow, let's say, hopefully you can see that that's just an incredibly not efficient way of doing it at all. What if I moved my whole arm from the shoulder? And this is something that I almost never do whatsoever. Why would you want to move your entire arm from the shoulder? This is absolutely no. We don't have anything left but to do it from the wrist. That is by far just the most logical way of playing staccato. So, and what I'm doing is just really sort of, it's just this, it's just moving up and down from the wrist in this kind of way. It's like, if I exaggerate, up and down, like flapping your wrists up and down, is how I get that. Now, something that I may not have emphasized enough, I did mention it, but I might not have emphasized it enough, is that when the wrist comes down so that you play the note, you really do not still want to be pulling with your fingers. So let's say I get to the top of the scale where I'm using my fourth finger on the B at the top. So finger 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hopefully it should be kind of obvious now by everything that I've been saying that if I pull with my finger at the same time that my wrist arrives, I'm also going to be pulling all my other fingers. And not only does that feel awkward and feel uncomfortable, but it makes it harder to play evenly. So what I want to really emphasize is that when my hand comes down and plays any note, the finger is relaxed, but in a position where it's going to take the weight. So an exercise that I make a lot of my students do is I either get them to close their full board or I get them to do this on the table. And what I get them to do is to tap with their individual fingers as loudly as they can. And hopefully, I mean, my thumb's going to sound slightly different because it's landing on a different part of that finger because it's not a normal finger like the other fingers. But the other fingers have very solid, very equal kind of tapping sound. Hopefully you can hear that through this microphone because the microphone is very unidirectional. But you can hear that that's pretty loud. Now, what most people do when they do that at first is they kind of tap on the pads of their fingers, you know, something that looks more like this. And when I do that, it's nowhere near as loud. And actually, because this kind of reverberates, maybe that's going to be too loud. Let me grab a book so that I can really demonstrate. So here's like a good loud tap. But what most people do is they'll play more on their fingertips. More on the pads of their fingers, which is just Try this out yourselves and see how loud that you can get this tapping. And you'll find that you will only get it really, really loud when you're right on your fingertips. But if your fingernails are hitting the table or whatever you're tapping on, your fingernails are too long, you need to cut them. So the less you're landing on the tips of your fingers, it's just going to be and you'll find that when you get that really loud tapping, that is when your finger has a strong shape. If your finger doesn't have a strong shape, you won't be on the fingertip and you won't be making a loud tapping sound. Now, be a little bit careful with this, because if you get really good at this, you can actually bruise your fingertips. So don't bruise your fingertips. Sometimes when I demonstrate this to people, I end up bruising like the fingertips. That's not good. But anyway, so when the fingertip lands on the surface, it has an arch shape. And this arch shape is like, think about when the Romans built all their stone bridges. And, in England, we still have some of those Roman stone bridges. And we have trucks, lorries driving over them. They're super strong. And they're strong not because of the strength of the material. They're not built from concrete, steel, whatever. They're just stone. But it's the shape of them, which forms this arch shape, is super strong. And so if you think about having that shape with your finger when you land from the wrist, you don't need any strength in there. You don't need any tension. Just purely that shape will hold the weight of the force that goes into it. So, in the beginning, and what the bane of a lot of piano teachers' lives is when the fingers buckle backwards. And when the finger buckles backwards, it's not going to take the weight. So if it buckles backwards and I land on it, you've got no control. You've got no way of putting that energy into the key. But over time, you kind of and this exercise of the tapping very loudly is very, very useful, because it gets your hand intuitively used to having that very strong arch shape. So anyhow, so when your wrist comes down, the finger that's going to play is in that strong arch shape. The other fingers are very lightly just pulled up out of the way. So the thumb obviously can't do that. The thumb just sort of goes on the side. But as soon as I get to the second finger, it's already got that shape. And that shape is there when I come down. It immediately relaxes. There's no need for strength of any kind whatsoever. The wrist comes down, the shape takes the weight, you relax. And then same thing with the third finger, same thing, thumb there, second finger, third finger, fourth finger, little finger. And the beauty of this is that when you land on the fourth finger and the little finger, because you're not using any strength, you're not pulling, all you're doing, you land with the shape that you want that's going to take the weight. You have completely even. You don't need to be stronger. You don't need to get, strong fourth and fifth fingers. It's just all from the wrist. It's just all from the wrist. The fingers don't do anything. What this also means is that when you come up, after you've played the note and you come up, the finger just kind of trails behind and completely relaxed. So if I sort of demonstrate here very kind of slowly, you go down with the shape already there. And when you come up, it's just completely relaxed. And all the other fingers are completely relaxed. So this was something that I was showing and explaining to a student recently. I hadn't sort of quite thought to explain it in this way. But when you come down, let's say I want to come down with my third finger, and the third finger is in this natural arch. So what you want to do when you're lifting your hand up away from the key is your finger is already in that natural shape, because when you come up, it's just already relaxed and in a natural curl. And I think that what some students do when they lift their hand, they're sort of lifting it out of the way. They're doing something weird like lifting it completely up and then bringing it down to then get into the arch shape. You don't need to do that. When you lift your hand, your fingers are already making a natural arch shape. Lift up, that's already in the right shape. Lift up, that's already in the right shape. Lift up, this one's the thumb. Lift up, that's already in the right shape, because I lift up, basically, it's like I'm lifting up. The wrist lifts up, but I feel almost like I'm lifting up from my knuckles, from my metacarpals. So as I lift up, the fingers are now in that right shape. I go down, and as I come up, it's already, I come up sort of almost from the knuckle, like this, and the fingers are already in a good shape to come down. So hopefully that's clear, and hopefully I haven't put you guys off by sort of going into the finer details, because what's about to follow now that I'm going to show you from an earlier tutorial, this is really the nuts and bolts of how you do this wrist staccato, which is pretty much my go-to way of doing almost any kind of staccato whatsoever, unless it's really, really, really fast, in which case you want that kind of pulling with your finger staccato, which is incredibly advanced, and I'll be doing a future video on it, so stay tuned for that. Anyway, here we go. Here's the good stuff. So it's absolutely essential, not just in the left hand, but in the right hand as well, like... Actually, no, yeah, there are places in the right hand where you're going to need this, which is like a wrist staccato. So, for example, let's take the top of this page, so bar 46. If we go... So here, bam, ba, ba, da, 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 da. Here, to go from the G to the A chord, you're going to want to go ba, 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 ba with your wrist like this. So, basically... I find that a lot of people find wrist staccato very, very difficult, but almost everybody knows how to dribble a basketball. I have had students who literally have not known what a basketball is, because I teach in England. Not everyone has played basketball. But if you imagine, for people who know what a basketball is and have felt one, you imagine, how do you dribble a basketball really close to the ground? And as you get close to the ground, everyone intuitively knows who's done this. You don't move your whole arm. Your whole arm, it's just impossible. You move your wrist. So I might bounce a ball from up here, from chest height, with my whole arm. And as I get lower and lower, it's still from the arm. But as I get lower and lower and lower, it starts to turn more into very relaxed wrist movements, not from the arm. So it sort of becomes more like... you won't be able to see this. So let's say that this book is the floor, and I'm dribbling the basketball. It's going to look like this. It's going to look like, because if I try and do it with my whole arm, and my wrist isn't moving, that's impossible. No one will ever be able to dribble a basketball. I encourage you right now, wherever you're watching, just imagine bouncing a basketball, and imagine bouncing it right by the ground. You'll realize that your wrist automatically does this. And yet, now the other thing as well is it's way more difficult with your non-dominant hand, which for most of us is going to be our left hand. I'm right-handed, so I find left hand wrist staccato much more difficult. But still, if you imagined bouncing a basketball, you could kind of do it you could kind of dribble with your left hand. It'd be more difficult, but you'd know what to do. You wouldn't just tense up your whole arm and try and use your whole arm to do it. So what I recommend, and this is something that really works very, very powerfully for my students, but you have to do this. And most of my students just don't do this. They hear the words and they don't go and do it. So let's just take the first two notes in the left hand in bar 2, which are just basically the left hand twice. So imagine, well, don't imagine. So basically we play. Hopefully you can see my wrist from there. Hopefully the microphone isn't in the way. So you want something like this. Your wrist is straight. Now, can you pull your wrist up so it makes a right angle like this? So right angle up, back down, right angle up, back down. And you want to do this with this note. Right angle, wrist up, down, like this. And just in case you can't see it, I'm doing this with my little finger landing. I'm not playing. My little finger isn't doing anything. My little finger is just ready to play, and it just then plays like that. Do not pull with your little finger when you arrive. There isn't a single part of your finger that moves when you actually get there. It's all from the wrist. And then what I encourage is, over even weeks, you might need to do this over weeks, just get your nervous system used to this extreme exaggerated wrist movement. But then when I show my students this, they do something that looks like this. It barely moves, and they think they're doing it, but they're not. You must exaggerate it. You must really exaggerate it. I mean, when I say you must, this isn't how you end up playing, But this is going to be the quickest way to tell your nervous system this is what you want from it. And then you gradually speed up. But if at any point you've got to be very, very sensitive to the tiniest, and I mean the tiniest bit of tension, anywhere from your elbow up to your upper arm, up to your shoulders. If anything starts to tense, you stop and you go slower. The enemy is tension in your upper arm, elbow, shoulder, particularly upper arm. So your goal is to flap your wrist without any tension in your arm. And this is why you want to exaggerate that motion. Because if you don't, chances are much higher that bits of tension will start creeping in. It really is just like a flat when you do this fast. So having said that, still when I am playing from bar 34, and I am going a little faster, I think, than the tempo marking, I do start to tense up. It's impossible for me to play this without a little bit of tension. But the more you can practice this very relaxed wrist staccato, it'll be possible without just so much tension that it just stops you from playing. But also, if you have tension and you're playing repeated notes, you can actually get wrist injuries as well. So if you're, and by the way, when you do this thing with your wrist, if you get any pain whatsoever, stop. Never play through pain. Never, ever, ever play through pain. Stop. And see if you can figure out, well, why are you getting pain? Where is the tension that's causing you the pain? What is the movement that's causing you the pain? And do not push through it, because you can have permanent injuries that stop you playing the piano if you push through the pain. I'm being completely serious. And they can escalate very, very quickly if you're not careful. Right, so that was the first explanation from a previous tutorial on how to do wrist staccato. Before I take you to the next video, just a quick reminder that if you're enjoying the video, if it's useful, please, if you can, do take the time to like and subscribe and click on the bell icon to be notified about future videos. Also, I do have some space in my online studio for students. If you're interested in having me as a teacher, do contact me in the link below in the description if you'd like more details about that. Anyway, on with the show. So all of this, you need a very relaxed wrist. So what I do sometimes is I encourage my students to either imagine or buy or use a basketball. So if you get a basketball and you dribble it very, very near to the ground, so like you get it as near to the ground as you can and you dribble it and you keep it dribbling, you'll find that the only way you can do this is by moving your wrist. Everyone knows how to do this. Everyone knows instinctively, I think, how to dribble a basketball near the ground. Even if you've never dribbled a basketball before, you'll quickly work out what you do to keep it bouncing when it's right next to the ground. You move your wrist up and down a lot, and that's if you try and do it. Now, it's very, very common that when we get tense, when we concentrate, when we strive and try really hard, the wrist gets stiff. And if the wrist is not moving and you start doing the whole thing with your arm, it's going to be very, very difficult. You'll get notes wrong, it's exhausting, and the sound's going to be wrong. So if you look at my wrist as I do this and look at my whole body, it's effortless, it's so easy. If you do it with your wrist unmoving, your whole arm is tense, everything is tense, it feels very, very hard.